Obviously, a top priority is the conflict in Syria. To deal with the refugee crisis that it has spawned and the violent extremism to which it has contributed. Let me just say a word about that quickly. Much, if not all, no, I suppose much is the most accurate assessment, of the conflict of the last century was a conflict between nation states. It was much of it defined by what Henry Kissinger has often defined as the balance of power, the great game. But that is not what is defining the conflict that we see today. I think most of you would make the judgment that there is not the same sense of threat, that nation states are ready to put it all on the line given the stakes and the types of weapons that we have today, which do act as deterrent. But what we are seeing today are non-state actors who have a very different sense of the stakes, who don't react the same way to the concept of deterrence. Many of whom have decided, by the way, that they just as soon die as live, which is not the norm for most people's judgment. So our strategy is different. Our strategy with respect to Syria certainly is threefold. But what we're seeing emerge is really a transformation that represents not a clash of civilizations, because there's nothing civilized about Daesh. It's barbaric. It's a step backwards in time, not by years, but by centuries. And it represents a clash not of civilizations, but of culture and modernity. A clash of people who've been left behind and who find some false notion of explanation for their acts in the hijacking of a great religion or the distortion of the most fundamental notions of how people should choose to live. So, with respect to Daesh, we have, first of all, intensified our campaign. First, through a 65-member international coalition that we have mobilized to degrade and defeat the terrorist group known as Daesh. ISIL, some people call it, but there's nothing Islamic about it. There's nothing that merits being called a state. Daesh is literally the embodiment of evil. Psychopaths who murder and rape, adventurists in some cases, criminals in many cases, who torture and pillage and call it the will of God. Earlier this week, we heard about one terrorist, a member of Daesh, whose mother pleaded with him to leave the group because she thought they were going to get beaten, and she didn't want her son killed. What did he do? He turned her in, and then by his own hand, publicly executed her. To quote the president, these people are killers and fanatics who have to be rooted out, hunted down, and destroyed, period. And we will do that. Our efforts are directed both at Daesh's core networks in Syria and Iraq, and at strangling attempts by the terrorists to establish branches and inspire attacks elsewhere in the world, including in the United States. Now, we have known from the moment that we formed our international coalition in the fall of 2014. And by the way, it merits remembering that this coalition has only been at this for a little over a year now. We knew that success was not going to be measured in a matter of weeks and months. It would be measured in years, as it was with al-Qaeda. And I said at the time, 2014, that it would take some time. So did the president. But in the end, mark my words, not as a matter of braggadocio, but as a matter of fact, Daesh will be defeated. Every country in the region that surrounds Iraq and Syria is opposed to Daesh. Iran, Jordan, Lebanon, Qatar, Turkey, down to the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and way beyond, which is why we have a coalition of 65 nations. The progress we have already made towards that end of defeating them is undeniable. Last month, Iraqi forces with coalition support retook most of the provincial capital of Ramadi, further reducing the area that was controlled by terrorists. In the past half year, the coalition and its partners have worked with Iraqi forces to liberate Tikrit, and 100,000 Sunni have been able to return to begin to rebuild homes and find homes. We've been able to free Sinjar, remove terrorist commanders from the battlefield, including nearly a dozen leaders in the past few weeks alone. And we have worked together to cut off the terrorist supply lines, to hammer their oil facilities, to take away their resources, to deprive Daesh of more than 40% of the territory that it once occupied in Iraq. Daesh has not been able to seize a major town or city since last May. And the coalition is stepping up the pressure even further. We are intensifying airstrikes in northern Syria, assisting our partners along the border between Syria and Turkey, and helping to squeeze Daesh's remaining strongholds in Mosul and Raqqa. And we are opening the aperture for further cooperation with others in the region, including Russia. Meanwhile, we are doing more every day to prevent foreign fighters from joining Daesh and to stop those who do from returning to their home countries and engaging in terrorist activities. We are also doing more to rebut terrorist propaganda, to dry up revenue resources. We have opened a number of facilities on a global basis, one in the Emirates, another opening before long elsewhere, that will help deal with the challenge of social media management in an effort to be able to take away the recruitment and the lone wolf challenge. We know more than ever about Daesh's sources of income, and that has allowed us to be more strategic in our efforts, with greater impact on Daesh's ability to be able to sustain itself. There is no question that we have significantly degraded Daesh's ability to profit from the oil that it controls, and we have made anyone who might consider doing business with them think twice. So degrading and defeating Daesh is the first pillar of our strategy. The second is to work with our partners to prevent the violence from spreading. Just the other day, we had a significant meeting with respect to Libya, and you can anticipate additional efforts with respect to Daesh's efforts to spread its tentacles into Libya and elsewhere. And that is one reason why we are now providing a record amount of humanitarian assistance, more than $4.5 billion to date, which is more than any other nation in the world, directly to deal with the problem of displaced people out of Syria and Iraq. And we are doing more to strengthen the defense capabilities of Jordan, Lebanon, and other friends in the region. This is really important work, and I guarantee you it's going to continue. But the main reason for these efforts is the outrageous human suffering that this war has visited upon Syrians and their neighbors. Many of you may have seen the so-called Caesar pictures last year, more than 10,000 photographs, each individual. So not repetitive, but individualized, showing massive torture, starvation, extraordinary government policy by the Assad regime, in addition to barrel bombing of children and innocent families, schools, hospitals, not to mention the fact that there was widespread use of gas, which we thought we had outlawed as an instrument of war after World War I. This is precisely why we are expanding our focus now and our response to the worst refugee crisis that the world has seen since the Second World War. This fall, President Obama will host a summit on the margins of the UN General Assembly in New York. And this event will be the culmination of a rigorous effort to strengthen the humanitarian system for delivery of help, to be able to secure new funding and increase opportunities for resettlement and humanitarian admission around the world. A comprehensive effort for millions of Syrian refugees, but also for those from any country who qualify for refugee status. In that vein, I am pleased to announce that we have plans to expand the U.S. refugee admissions program in order to help vulnerable families and individuals from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, and offer them a safe and legal alternative to the dangerous journey that many are tempted to begin, making them at that instant easy prey for human smugglers who have no interest but their own profits. I might add, making them also prey for one of the great scourges of the world today, which is human trafficking, and many, many people, millions, 20 million plus, living in a state of modern slavery. Global efforts also need to focus on ways to better integrate refugees into foreign communities in order to help them regain their dignity after the turmoil that they have endured. And this is in the best traditions of our country and of many countries around the world. That is why measures to help refugees build self-reliance through education and opportunities for local employment are so important, so that the men, women, and children who come to our nations are better equipped to contribute to the communities that welcome them. Now, after this speech, I will be heading to Silver Spring, Maryland, where I will meet with a group of dedicated Americans who work in one of our resettlement centers, helping refugees integrate into their new communities in the United States. And lately, this critical work has been conducted against a backdrop of some pretty nasty politics, with people making statements on the refugee issue that seem designed to scare our citizens, but have no basis in the facts. Let me be very, very clear. We can both maintain the highest security standards and live up to our best traditions as Americans by welcoming those in need of help to our great country. That is who we are. That is what we do. That is how we wrote our history. That's how we became who we are. And we dare not turn our backs on future people, generations, seeking the same set of opportunities. We have the ability to protect ourselves, even as we remain a country that welcomes migration. And that is why, while I am in Silver Spring, I will also meet with a group of refugees, newly arrived, some well-established, in order to hear about their experiences and to emphasize how welcome they are in our nation. Now, the refugee crisis is not just a Syrian problem, nor a Middle Eastern problem, or a European or an African problem. It is a global challenge of historic proportions and dimensions, and it tests our values, our self-confidence, and our very humanity. We have to do all that we can to respond effectively. And the most effective response of all, my friends, involves the pursuit of peace. I said to my staff at the State Department engaged in the Syria conflict at the end of last year, you know, I'm tired of going out and bragging that we're the biggest donor to refugee needs. Write a check, help the refugees. That can go on endlessly. We keep writing checks. We can set up a new camp. The question is, can we make peace and end this endless supply of refugees? In the past 4.5 years, 1 Syrian in 20 has been killed or wounded. 1 in 5 is a refugee. 1 in 2 has been displaced. And the reality is there will be no end to this crisis. No end to the pressures on Lebanon, on Jordan, on Turkey. No end to the flow of people to Greece and Bulgaria and through there to Europe and Germany. No end to this crisis unless there is an end to the conflict itself. One person stands in the way of that, and that is Bashar al-Assad. That is why the third pillar of our strategy is to de-escalate the conflict in Syria. And that can only happen through a political transition, Every leader I've met with says to me, there's no military solution, you've got to have a political solution. I mean, you can, you know, I suppose you can sit there and make the argument there's a military solution, and you could wind up like the Roman historian Tacitus, who wrote of Carthage, they made a desert and called it peace. Sure. But if you want to hold the country together, if you want to restore the secular, united Syria that once was, if you want to bring people together in a way that allows Sunni and Shia and Druze and Ismaili and Christians all to live together, then you need a political transition, you need a political settlement. Last November in Vienna, the United States and other members of the International Syria Support Group finally agreed upon a series of specific steps to stop the bleeding in Syria, to advance the political transition, to isolate the terrorists, and to help the Syrian people begin to rebuild their country. Now, I can't stand here before you today and tell you this is going to work. I know how it could, but it's going to require the cooperation of countries in conflict. It was monumental that we were able to bring Saudi Arabia and Iran to the table together in order to join in this, and it is important that both have said they will not allow their current differences to stand in the way of working towards a settlement. In December, we and the other members of the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution endorsing the work of the Vienna Support Group, of the International Syria Support Group, bringing the full weight of the global community behind this process. So for the first time, every one of the major international players has come around a table together with a specific timetable for negotiations between the responsible opposition and Syria's government. And because of the hard work of all of those parties, those talks are now slated to begin later this month on January 25th. It will be difficult. It will require good faith effort by Russia, Iran, by all the players to push for the implementation of the Geneva communique, which calls for a transition unity government. But it is not to be missed by anybody here that even Iran put forward an important contribution to the dialogue in a peace plan that called for a unity government, constitutional reform, a ceasefire, and an election. And that is part of what has been embraced by the Vienna Support Group. So obstacles to peace always remain. There's always an obstacle to peace. Look at the frozen conflicts we have in the world. But the need for settlement is clear. And the more progress we make towards that goal, the easier it will be to mount a truly effective and sustained and unified effort against Daesh.